Welcome back to Stories with Mr. Parker. If you're here, it means part one resonated with you, and I'm grateful you chose to come back. Before we dive into part two, I want to say a quick word of prayer. May every woman watching this be surrounded by strength that never wavers. May your courage rise when challenges come. May you recognize your worth even when others try to diminish it. May you be protected from those who mistake your kindness for weakness. And may you always have the wisdom to choose yourself when the world asks you to choose everyone else first. May clarity guide your decisions. May resilience carry you through storms. And may you never forget that you are worthy of respect, honesty, and love that doesn't require you to lose yourself to keep it. Amen. Now, if you haven't watched part one, pause this video right now and go back. This story builds, and you need the foundation to appreciate where we're going. For everyone who's ready, let's jump back into Adriana's journey. Part two is where everything Damien built comes crashing down. Let's get into it. The law offices of Morrison and Associates occupied the 38th floor of a building in Midtown, all glass and steel, and the kind of quiet that came with hourly rates most people couldn't imagine. Rachel Morrison had a reputation. She'd represented 3 different women in divorces from billionaires, and all 3 had walked away with more than anyone expected. She didn't just win cases. She destroyed the opposition so thoroughly they wished they'd never try to hide assets in the first place. Adriana sat across from her in a conference room that overlooked Central Park, watching the attorney review the documents she'd brought. Bank statements, emails, screenshots, the evidence of Damien's offshore accounts and his systematic planning. Rachel's expression didn't change as she read, but her eyes got sharper with each page. "Your husband made several critical mistakes," Rachel said finally, setting down the papers. "First, he underestimated you. Second, he got greedy. And third, he documented everything. These emails alone are enough to prove he's been hiding marital assets with intent to defraud you in a divorce. That's not just a civil matter. That could be criminal. Can we use that? We can use everything. But Adriana, I need you to understand what you're walking into. Michael Chen is excellent at what he does. He's going to argue that your prenup is invalid because you signed it in California, but you've been New York residents for 11 years. He's going to claim that marital funds were used to improve your inherited properties, which makes them partially community property. He's going to paint you as financially controlling, and your husband as a victim who contributed to assets he was excluded from. None of that is true. Truth and legal strategy aren't always the same thing. Chen will twist everything to create reasonable doubt about who owns what. That's his specialty. Rachel leaned forward. But here's what he doesn't know. Your grandmother's additional trusts. The $47 million. That gives you resources to fight this properly. It also gives you leverage he won't see coming. How? Because right now, Damien thinks you have $5 million in protected inheritance and maybe access to some jointly titled assets he can claim portions of. He's built his entire strategy around that assumption. When he discovers you have $47 million he knew nothing about, his whole case collapses. Suddenly, you're not the victim he can paint as needing his financial contribution. You're a wealthy woman who was smart enough to protect her assets from a husband planning to steal them. Adriana felt something settle in her chest. Not quite relief, but close. What do we do first? First, we document everything from this point forward. I'm going to hire a forensic accountant to trace every dollar Damien has moved in the last 2 years. We're going to find every offshore account, every shell company, every hidden asset. Then we're going to build a case so airtight that Michael Chen will advise your husband to settle before this ever sees a courtroom. And if he doesn't settle, Rachel smiled, and it wasn't a kind expression. Then we destroy him publicly. Financial fraud, tax evasion, breach of fiduciary duty to his own company if he used corporate resources to hide personal assets. By the time we're done, he won't just lose the divorce. He'll lose everything. Over the next 2 weeks, Adriana assembled a team that would have impressed her grandmother. Rachel Morrison as her lead attorney. David Chun, no relation to Michael, as her forensic accountant. A private investigator named Marcus Webb, who specialized in surveillance and digital forensics. And Nadia, who was using her investigative journalism contacts to build a parallel case that could go public if needed. David Chin was the first to report back. He'd spent a week tracing Damien's financial movements, and what he found was damning. Your husband has been moving money for at least 2 years, David explained in Rachel's conference room, his laptop connected to a projector showing flowcharts that looked like conspiracy theories. He started small. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. Amounts small enough not to trigger automatic reporting requirements. But over 24 months, he's moved approximately $6 million into offshore accounts. $6 million. Adriana's voice was steady, but inside she felt sick. From where? From everywhere. Joint investment accounts. His salary. Bonuses. Even some funds that appear to have come from Pierce and Hastings' capital operational accounts, which is a much bigger problem for him. Rachel leaned forward. Are you saying he embezzled from his own company? I'm saying money that should have been classified as business expenses ended up in personal offshore accounts. Whether that's technically embezzlement depends on how it was authorized, but it's definitely questionable. David clicked to another slide. The accounts are in the Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, and Singapore, all in the names of shell companies that trace back to trust controlled by your husband and Vivian Laurent. Vivian has access to these accounts. Not just access. She's a co-trustee on the Singapore account, which means she can withdraw funds, make transfers, essentially control half of what's there. Adriana thought about that, about Damien giving his mistress control over money he'd stolen from their marriage, about how confident he must have been that Adriana would never find out. Can we trace when Vivian was added to these accounts? Already did. 8 months ago, right around the time the emails between them started discussing divorce timelines. Rachel made a note. That's premeditation. That's evidence of conspiracy to defraud a spouse. This gets better and better. But it also got worse, because the more they dug, the more Adriana understood just how methodically Damien had been planning this. He kept detailed spreadsheets of her inherited properties, had gotten his name added to insurance policies as an additional insured, even though he had no ownership stake, had collected contractor quotes for maintenance work, even though Adriana had paid for everything herself. He'd been building a paper trail, creating the appearance of contribution, setting up a case that he'd helped improve and maintain assets that legally belonged only to her. It's actually brilliant, Rachel admitted grudgingly. Unethical and illegal, but brilliant. He's been manufacturing evidence for 2 years that he was an active participant in managing your properties. Michael Chin is going to use all of this to argue for equitable distribution despite the prenup. Can he win with that argument? In New York? Maybe. The courts here have been known to invalidate prenups if they can show one party contributed significantly to assets the other tried to protect. Your husband getting his name on insurance, coordinated with contractors, being involved in tenant issues, all of that could be painted as contribution that entitles him to compensation. Adriana felt the careful control she'd been maintaining start to crack. So he might actually get away with this. Even with all our evidence of fraud, he might walk away with millions of dollars that aren't his. Not if we move first. Rachel pulled out another folder. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to file before he does. We're going to file in a jurisdiction that's favorable to prenup enforcement. And we're going to attach evidence of his offshore accounts and financial fraud to our initial filing. The moment those documents become part of the public record, several things happen. First, the IRS gets very interested. Second, his company's board gets very interested. Third, Michael Chen's entire strategy falls apart because suddenly your husband isn't the aggrieved party. He's the criminal. When? We need 2 more weeks to finish the forensic accounting, to make sure we found every account, every asset, every piece of evidence. Then we file, and Damien Cole's carefully constructed plan implodes. Adriana went home that night and cooked dinner like she did most nights. Damien came home at 8. They ate together. He talked about the merger, which was apparently in its final stages. The deal would close in 6 weeks, he said. It would be the biggest acquisition Pierce and Hastings had ever completed. Once this closes, I'm taking time off, he said, reaching across the table to take her hand. We should go somewhere. Just the 2 of us. Reconnect. I feel like we've been ships passing in the night lately. Adriana looked at their joined hands and thought about him holding Vivian's hand the same way, probably making her the same promises. That sounds nice. Where were you thinking? Maybe that place in Tuscany you always wanted to visit. The one you showed me in that magazine. She had shown him that article. 3 years ago. She dog-eared the page and left it on his nightstand with a note saying, "Someday." He glanced at it and said they'd go and work, settle down. She'd assumed he'd forgotten. Now she realized he'd filed it away. Another detail to use when he needed to seem attentive. "I'd like that," she lied, and watched something that might have been relief cross his face. He was working hard to seem like the devoted husband, probably on Michael Chen's advice, building narrative that he tried to save the marriage before reluctantly concluding it couldn't be saved. That night, after Damien fell asleep, Adriana's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Webb, the private investigator. She went to the bathroom, locked the door, and read the message. "Got something. Call when you can talk." She called him from the bathtub with the water running to cover the sound. "I've been following your husband for a week," Marcus said, without preamble. "He's been very careful. Varies his routes. Checks for tails. Whoever taught him counter-surveillance knew what they were doing. But you followed him anyway. I'm better at this than he is at avoiding it. He's been to Vivian Lauren's penthouse 4 times this week. Stays between 2 and 4 hours each visit. He's also meeting regularly with Michael Chun. And here's the interesting part. He met with someone from his company's board of directors yesterday. Private lunch. Very quiet. I couldn't get audio, but the body language suggested he was preparing them for something. Preparing them for what? My guess? He's getting ahead of the divorce announcement. Spinning the narrative before you have a chance to control it. If he tells the board first, frames it as an amicable split, positions himself as a reasonable party. It protects his position at the company. Adriana closed her eyes. Of course he was. Of course he was managing every angle, every relationship, every potential consequence. What else? Vivian Lauren is pregnant. About 3 months along based on what I overheard when I was tailing her to a doctor's appointment. She told someone on the phone it was Damien's, and they're planning to go public with their relationship after your divorce is finalized. The bath water suddenly felt too hot. Adriana's skin prickled. Pregnant. Vivian was pregnant with Damien's child. While he was sleeping next to Adriana and making plans for Tuscany and playing a devoted husband. "Are you still there?" Marcus asked. "Yeah, I'm here. Does Damien know about the pregnancy?" "Based on the text messages I've intercepted, yes. He knows. They've been discussing baby names." Baby names. They were discussing baby names for a child conceived while he was still married to her, while he was still sharing her bed and making promises, and lying so smoothly she believed every word. "Thank you, Marcus. Send me everything you have." She hung up and sat in the bathtub until the water went cold. Then she got out, dried off, and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked the same. Same face. Same dark eyes. Same shoulder-length hair. But something behind the eyes had gone absolutely arctic. Pregnant. Vivian was pregnant. Adriana went back to bed and lay beside Damien in the dark. She thought about telling Rachel. About how a pregnancy would complicate everything. About how Damien would use it to paint himself as a man torn between obligation and love. About how Chin would spin this into a narrative of star-crossed lovers, kept apart by a wife who refused to let go. But she also thought about her grandmother's letter. About refusing to be kind when kindness meant destroying yourself. About understanding that some battles required weapons you never wanted to use. She thought about that until dawn. The next morning, she called Rachel and told her about the pregnancy. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. This changes things. Not legally, because a child conceived during an affair doesn't give him any additional rights. But optically, it's a problem. A jury, if this goes to trial, might be sympathetic to the image of man in love, trying to do the right thing, caught between 2 women. So we don't let it go to trial. Agreed. We accelerate our timeline. We file this week, before he has a chance to control the narrative, before the pregnancy becomes public knowledge. We hit him so hard and so fast that he doesn't have time to spin this into anything except what it is. Financial fraud and infidelity. They filed on a Friday afternoon. The papers were delivered to Damien at his office by a process server who found him in a board meeting. Adriana wasn't there to see his face when he opened the envelope and realized his wife had moved first, that she'd known everything, that she'd been planning while he thought she was oblivious. But Marcus was there, outside the building, and he texted her a photo. Damien emerging from Pierce and Hastings headquarters 30 minutes after being served. His face gray, his tie loosened, his expression absolutely shattered. Got served. Looked like a man who just watched his world end. Adriana looked at the photo and felt nothing except cold satisfaction. She was at the nonprofit, in her office, surrounded by the work she'd built that had nothing to do with being someone's wife. Her assistant knocked on the door. "Mrs. Cole? Your husband is on line 1. He sounds upset. Tell him I'm in a meeting. Take a message." She didn't take his calls that day. Didn't respond to his texts. Let him sit with the knowledge that everything he'd planned had been discovered and documented, and was now part of a legal filing that painted him as exactly what he was. A liar. A cheat. A man who'd tried to steal from his wife while pretending to love her. At 7 that evening, he showed up at the nonprofit, walked past her assistant, burst into her office with the kind of fury she'd never seen from him. "What did you do?" His voice was shaking. "What the hell did you do, Adriana?" She looked up from her computer with the calm of someone who'd been expecting this. "I protected myself. Same thing you've been planning to do to me for the last 4 months. You filed for divorce without even talking to me, without giving me a chance to explain. Explain what exactly? The offshore accounts? The $6 million you've hidden? The fact that you've been sleeping with Vivian Laurent for at least 6 months while lying to my face? Which part did you want to explain?" He actually flinched, actually looked shocked that she knew details. "You've been spying on me. I've been protecting my assets from a husband who's been systematically trying to steal them. There's a difference. Those accounts were for our future. For us. For us." Adriana stood up, and something in her expression made him take a step back. "You added Vivian as a trustee 8 months ago. You've been planning to divorce me since before you even retained Michael Chun. So don't stand in my office and lie about us, Damien. There is no us. There hasn't been for a long time. I was just too trusting to see it. I never wanted to hurt you. You just wanted my money. And when you couldn't get it legally, you decided to manufacture a case that you contributed to my properties. Insurance policies. Contractor quotes. Getting involved in tenant issues. You've been building evidence for 2 years that you helped maintain assets that were never yours. That's not love, Damien. That's fraud." His face went through several emotions. Shock that she knew the depth of his planning. Calculation about how to respond. Then something that might have been genuine regret. "I did love you. Once. At the beginning. But not enough to be honest when you fell in love with someone else. Not enough to just ask for a divorce instead of trying to rob me first. And definitely not enough to tell me your girlfriend is 3 months pregnant with your child." All the color drained from his face. "How did you know about that?" "Because unlike you, when I decided to protect myself, I did it properly. I hired the best people. I found every account, every asset, every lie you've been telling, and I documented all of it before I filed." Damien sank into the chair across from her desk, put his head in his hands. For a moment, he looked like a man who genuinely lost something he valued. Then he looked up, and the calculation was back in his eyes. "If you drop this filing, we can work something out. Something reasonable. You don't want this to go public, Adriana. It'll be messy. It'll hurt your nonprofit's reputation. Donors don't like scandal. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you a way out. Drop the filing. We'll negotiate privately. I'll agree to a clean break. No claims on your properties. But you have to let the offshore accounts go. Don't report them to the IRS. Don't make this criminal." Adriana looked at him across the desk and saw him clearly for the first time in 8 years. This man wasn't offering her anything except a deal that protected himself. He wasn't sorry he'd lied. He was sorry he'd been caught. "Get out of my office." "Adriana, please." Get out. And Damien, tell Michael Chin that every call, every text, every contact you make with me from this point forward goes through our attorneys. We're done talking." He left, and Adriana sat in her office as the sun set over the city and felt something fundamental shift. She'd stood up to him, refused his manipulation, chosen herself over making things easier for everyone else. Her grandmother would have been proud. Her phone rang. "Rachel Morrison, your husband's attorney just called. Michael Chin wants to meet. Says his client is willing to discuss settlement terms." "Already? We just filed this afternoon." Because Chin read our filing. He read the evidence attachments. And he knows they're in serious trouble. The offshore accounts alone are enough to trigger a federal investigation. The fact that Damien used company resources to fund some of them could cost him his job. Chin is smart enough to know when his client is exposed. "What did you tell him?" "That we consider meeting once they provide full financial disclosure. Every account, every asset, every shell company. If they want to settle, they need to come to the table with complete transparency. And if they don't, then we file a supplemental motion with the IRS. We make the fraud public, and we let the federal government do what the federal government does best. Destroy people who think they're too smart to get caught." That night, Adriana didn't go home to the penthouse. She couldn't face sleeping in that bed, in that apartment, surrounded by the ghosts of a marriage that had been rotting from the inside while she believed it was solid. Instead, she checked into a hotel, the Four Seasons, got a suite with a view of Central Park, ordered room service, and sat by the window watching the city lights. Her phone buzzed. "Nadia, just saw the news. You filed. How are you?" Adriana typed back. "Surviving. He showed up at my office. Tried to make a deal. What did you say?" "I told him to get out. That we're done talking." "Good. You want company?" "Tomorrow. Tonight, I just need to be alone. Call if you change your mind. Proud of you." Adriana set down her phone and let herself feel the full weight of what she'd done. She'd blown up her marriage, made it public, started a war that would get ugly before it got resolved. But she'd also chosen herself. Chosen truth over comfortable lies. Chosen protecting what was hers over making things easy for a man who'd been planning her destruction. Her grandmother's voice was clear in her head. This is what strength looks like. Not pretty, not comfortable, just necessary. She slept better that night than she had in weeks. The next few days moved fast. Michael Chin provided partial financial disclosure, enough to show they were taking the settlement discussion seriously, but not enough to reveal everything. Rachel pushed back, said they needed complete transparency or the IRS conversation would happen. Then something unexpected occurred. Something that changed the entire landscape of the divorce. Damien's mother called Adriana directly, which violated the attorney-only communication order. But Patricia Cole was 72 years old and had never cared much for rules she found inconvenient. "I need to see you," Patricia said. "In person, not at the penthouse. Somewhere neutral." They met at a cafe in the Upper West Side. Patricia arrived looking older than Adriana, remembered, tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. "I'm going to tell you something Damien doesn't know I know," Patricia said without preamble. "And after I tell you, you'll understand why I'm here." She pulled out her own phone, showed Adriana text messages between herself and her son. Messages where Patricia had confronted Damien about the divorce, where she'd asked if the rumors about an affair were true, where Damien had responded with a version of events that painted Adriana as controlling and cold, as someone who'd made him feel trapped, as a wife who'd refused to have children because she was too focused on her career. "None of that is true," Adriana said quietly. "I know, because I also have these." Patricia showed her different texts between Damien and his father. Messages where Damien discussed the offshore accounts, where he'd asked his father, who'd made a fortune in real estate before retiring, for advice on hiding assets, where William Cole had given his son detailed instructions on creating shell companies and moving money without triggering reporting requirements. "My husband helped him." Patricia's voice shook. "My husband, who I've been married to for 48 years, helped our son steal from you, coach him on fraud. And when I confronted William about it, he told me to stay out of it, said this was men's business. Adriana didn't know what to say. This woman had just discovered her entire family had been complicit in something unforgivable. I'm leaving William, Patricia continued. I've already retained a divorce attorney. And I'm here to tell you that if you need testimony about what Damien did, about what my husband helped him do, I'll provide it. Every text message, every conversation, I overheard everything. Patricia, you don't have to do this. This is your family. Your family too. Or you were. And I'll be damned if I stand by while the men in my life treat women like they're just assets to be managed and discarded when they're no longer useful. Patricia's eyes were fierce. My mother told me once that when you see injustice, you have two choices: participate or resist. I've participated for 48 years. I'm done. She left her phone with Adriana, told her to have Rachel's team download everything. Then she stood up. This 72-year-old woman who'd just chosen truth over loyalty and walked away with more dignity than Adriana had seen in anyone. Rachel nearly cried when she saw the messages. This is everything. This proves premeditation. This proves William Cole's involvement, which makes him liable too. This destroys any sympathy argument Chun was trying to build. Do you know what you have here? Proof. More than proof. You have a nuclear bomb. We send these to Chun, and they'll settle for whatever we demand. They won't have a choice. But before they could send anything, before Rachel could draft a settlement demand that would end this, something else happened. Something Adriana hadn't planned for and couldn't control. Vivian Loron showed up at Adriana's hotel. She looked terrible, pale, thin despite being pregnant. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying for days. The hotel security tried to stop her, but she pushed past them and found Adriana in the lobby. Please, Vivian said, her French accent thick with emotion. Please, I need to talk to you. If this was 3 weeks ago, Adriana might have refused, might have had security remove her, but something in Vivian's face stopped her. This wasn't a confident woman from a charity gala. This was someone broken. They went to Adriana's suite. Vivian sat on the couch and started crying before Adriana even asked why she was there. He lied to me, Vivian said, about everything, about you, about the money, about what would happen after the divorce. He told me you were controlling, that you had trapped him in a loveless marriage, that you refused to let him go. But I've been reading the court filings, the evidence your lawyers submitted, and I realized everything he told me was a lie. Adriana sat across from her and waited, let Vivian talk. He said you were wealthy, that after the divorce, we'd have enough money to live anywhere we wanted. He showed me pictures of properties he said would be his after the settlement, talked about the life we'd build. And I believed him because I wanted to, because I was in love and stupid and too selfish to ask the right questions. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm pregnant. And when I told him I wanted to make our relationship public, wanted to tell people about the baby, he told me to wait, said it would complicate the divorce. But then I saw the filing, saw that he's been hiding money, that he committed fraud, that he's going to lose everything, which means I'm going to have nothing. And I realized he was using me the same way he used you. Adriana looked at this woman who'd helped destroy her marriage and saw someone who'd been manipulated just as thoroughly as she had. Different lies. Different promises. Same blueprint. What do you want from me, Vivian? I want to know if what the court documents say is true. That he moved $6 million into accounts with my name on them without telling me what he was doing. Because if that's true, I'm an accomplice to fraud. I could go to prison for something I didn't even know I was part of. It's true. You're listed as co-trustee on the Singapore account. You have signature authority on transactions. Legally, you're liable. Vivian put her face in her hands. I didn't know. I signed papers he gave me. He said they were investment documents. Opportunities he was including me in. I never looked closely. I just trusted him. I know the feeling. They sat in silence for a moment. Two women who'd loved the same man and both been betrayed by him in different ways. I'll testify, Vivian said finally, against him, about what he told me, about how he framed you, about the promises he made that I now know were lies. I'll testify to all of it if it helps you. Why would you do that? Because I'm having his baby. And I don't want my child to grow up thinking their father's behavior was acceptable. I don't want to raise someone who thinks love is something you use as a weapon. And if putting Damien's lies on a record stops that, then I'll do it. Adriana studied her, looked for deception, found only exhaustion and regret, and the kind of clarity that comes from having your illusions shattered. Do you have somewhere to go? Someone to help you? My family in France. They told me not to come to New York for him. They were right. Adriana did something that surprised both of them. She pulled out her checkbook, wrote a check for $50,000, handed it to Vivian. This is for the baby, not for Damien, not for you, for the child who didn't ask to be part of this mess. Use it to go home, to start over, to build something that doesn't have anything to do with him. Vivian stared at the check like it might disappear. Why would you help me? I slept with your husband. I helped destroy your marriage. You didn't destroy anything that wasn't already broken. And I'm not helping you. I'm helping a child who's going to need a mother strong enough to choose better than we did. Take the money. Go home. Raise your baby somewhere Damien can't touch either of you. Vivian left with a check and a promise to send her testimony to Rachel's office. Adriana watched her go and felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness exactly, but something close. Understanding maybe that they'd both been victims of the same man's ability to make lies sound like love. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that mercy and boundaries can coexist, that you can help someone without betraying yourself. The next day, Michael Chin called Rachel with a settlement offer. Damien would agree to a complete divorce with no claims on any of Adriana's assets. No alimony. No property division. Clean break. In exchange, Adriana would agree not to report the offshore accounts to the IRS. Would agree not to pursue criminal charges. Would let him walk away with whatever money he'd already hidden. What did you tell him? Adriana asked when Rachel called to relay the offer. I told him we'd consider it. But Adriana, this is a good deal. You get everything you wanted. He gets nothing except freedom from prosecution. It's over. Except he keeps the $6 million he stole. He keeps the offshore accounts. He walks away with assets that should be part of the marital estate. True, but if you push for more, if you report him to the IRS, this becomes a federal case. That could take years to resolve. And there's no guarantee you'd see any of that money anyway. The government would seize it, use it to settle his tax liability, and you'd be left with nothing except the satisfaction of knowing he was punished. Adriana thought about that, about justice versus revenge, about winning versus making sure your opponent lost. What will my grandmother do? Rachel laughed. Based on everything I've learned about Eleanor Hartford, she'd take the deal. She'd walk away with everything that mattered and let him drown in his own mess. Because the real victory isn't destroying him. It's surviving him with your dignity intact. Then we take the deal. But I want one addition. I want him to sign an affidavit admitting to the affair, admitting to the offshore accounts, admitting that he planned the divorce while making me think our marriage was solid. I want his lies documented and signed in a legal document. That's not standard in settlement agreements. I don't care if he wants to avoid federal prosecution. He signs an affidavit telling the truth about what he did. That's my price. Michael Chin fought it, called it punitive, called it unnecessary. But eventually he agreed because the alternative was Adriana sending everything to the IRS, and Damien knew what that would cost him. Not just money, his freedom potentially, his company definitely, everything he'd built. They signed the settlement agreement 3 weeks later, in Rachel's office. Damien on one side of the conference table, Adriana on the other. Michael Chin looked defeated. Rachel looked victorious. And Damien looked like a man who'd aged 10 years in a month. He signed every page without looking at her. Signed the affidavit admitting to everything. Signed away any claim to her properties, her inheritance, her life. And when it was done, when the marriage was legally over, he finally met her eyes. I'm sorry, he said, for whatever that's worth now. Adriana looked at him and felt nothing except tired relief. It's worth exactly what it cost you to say it, which is nothing. Sorry is easy, Damien. Respect is what costs something. And you were never willing to pay that price. She walked out of Rachel's office, a free woman, divorced, protected, whole in a way she hadn't been in years. Nadia was waiting in the lobby with champagne and the kind of fierce pride that comes from watching someone you love choose themselves. How does it feel? Nadia asked as they walked out into the September afternoon. Like I can finally breathe. Like I'm myself again. Like I'm whoever I was before I let being someone's wife define me. They went to Adriana's hotel suite, opened the champagne, toasted to new beginnings and old friendships and grandmothers who've been wise enough to protect granddaughters they'd never get to see survive. Over the next 6 months, Adriana rebuilt her life piece by piece. She moved out of the Four Seasons and into a brownstone in Brooklyn that she bought with her grandmother's inheritance. Smaller than the Tribeca penthouse, but entirely hers. Every room reflecting her taste. Every corner free from memories of a marriage that had been rotting from the inside. She expanded her nonprofit, used some of Eleanor's money to create a foundation specifically for women escaping financial abuse. The Eleanor Hartford Foundation for Women's Economic Independence. The mission was simple. Teach women about money, about protecting assets, about recognizing the signs of financial manipulation before it destroyed them. Patricia Cole joined the board, the 72-year-old woman who'd left her husband of 48 years and discovered she didn't need him to survive. She and Adriana became unlikely friends, bound by survival and the understanding that sometimes choosing yourself meant losing people you thought were permanent. Damien's life unraveled exactly as predicted. The board of Pierce and Hastings Capital asked for his resignation after the settlement became public. The whispers about offshore accounts and financial impropriety made his position untenable. He took a job at a smaller firm, middle management, a fraction of his previous salary. The career he'd built imploded because it had been constructed on a foundation of lies. Vivian went back to France, had her baby, a girl she named Claire. She sent Adriana a photo months later. Just a baby. No message. But the fact that she'd sent it at all felt like something. Acknowledgement maybe. That they'd both survived the same storm and come out the other side. 1 year after the divorce, Adriana visited her grandmother's grave. It was October again. The leaves turning the same colors they'd been the night her marriage ended. She brought flowers, sat on the grass next to the headstone, and talked to Eleanor like she was still there. I used your playbook, Adriana said to the granite marker. Every strategy you left me, every lesson you taught. And it worked. He didn't get a penny. He didn't get to rewrite the narrative. He just got consequences, which is all I wanted, really, for him to face the natural outcome of his choices. The wind rustled through the trees. Adriana closed her eyes and imagined it was her grandmother responding, telling her she'd done well, that she'd honored the legacy of women who'd fought the same battles in different decades. I'm dating someone, Adriana continued, a professor. He teaches ethics at Columbia, which is ironic given everything. He's kind, patient, doesn't have offshore accounts or secret families, or any of the red flags I'm now trained to spot from a mile away. I don't know if it'll last, but I know I'm going into it differently, with boundaries, with clarity, with the understanding that I don't need him. I just enjoy him, and that's a much better foundation than need ever was. She stayed until the sun started to set, until the cemetery staff started locking gates. Then she stood, brushed off her jeans, and walked back to her car feeling lighter than she had in years. Her phone buzzed. A text from the professor. Dinner tonight? There's a new Italian place in the West Village I've been wanting to try. She typed back. Sounds perfect. 7? 7 works. Looking forward to it. Adriana drove back to Brooklyn through the evening traffic, past the Tribeca building where she used to live, past Pierce and Hastings Capital where Damien used to work, past all the landmarks of a life she thought was permanent until she discovered it was built on sand. But she also drove past her nonprofit's new headquarters, past the community center where they held financial literacy workshops, past the coffee shop where she met with the women the foundation helped, past the markers of a life she'd built that had nothing to do with being anyone's wife, Subscribe to this channel if you believe in second chances. If you believe in women who refuse to stay small. If you believe that your story doesn't end when someone else decides you're disposable. That evening, over pasta and wine, the professor asked her about her day, and Adriana told him about visiting her grandmother, about the foundation, about the new program they were launching to help women understand prenuptial agreements before they signed them. Your grandmother sounds remarkable, he said. She survived a terrible marriage, built an empire while everyone underestimated her, and then spent her life making sure the women who came after her had tools she'd had to create for herself. That's a hell of a legacy. It is, and I'm trying to honor it, not by being her exactly, but by understanding what she was really teaching. That love without respect is just exploitation with better marketing. That financial independence isn't selfish. It's survival. That sometimes the most radical act of self-love is refusing to accept crumbs from someone else's table. The professor raised his glass. To grandmothers who taught us how to survive. To grandmothers who taught us how to survive, Adriana echoed, and meant it with every part of herself. Later that night, alone in her brownstone, Adriana opened her laptop and started writing. Not a legal document this time. Not a court filing or an evidence summary. Just her story. The whole thing from beginning to end. She wrote about the night in the office building when her world shattered. About her grandmother's hidden inheritance and impossible wisdom. About Nadia's fierce loyalty and Patricia's unexpected courage. About Vivian's broken promises and Rachel's brilliant strategy. About learning to choose herself when every instinct said to choose peace. She wrote until dawn. And when she finally closed a laptop, exhausted and emotionally run out, she realized something. This wasn't a story about a man who betrayed her. This was a story about a woman who refused to stay betrayed. About transformation. About the moment you decide that surviving isn't enough. That you deserve to thrive. That your value isn't determined by whether someone else sees it. Comment below and tell me what this story made you think about. Tell me about the moment you chose yourself. Tell me about the person who taught you that you were worth fighting for. I read every comment. Every single one. 2 years after the divorce, Adriana got a message from an unexpected source. Dimian, not through attorneys this time. Just a simple email to her personal account. I've been in therapy, working through why I did what I did. My therapist says I should reach out, not to ask forgiveness, but to acknowledge harm. So that's what I'm doing. I harmed you, systematically and deliberately. I told myself it was about money or love or some midlife crisis. But really it was about ego, about wanting to feel powerful and in control, about using people as tools for my own ambition. You deserve better. You deserved honesty even when honesty was uncomfortable. I'm sorry I couldn't give you that then. I hope you built something beautiful from the wreckage I left. You always were better at building than I was. Adriana read it twice, looked for manipulation, for hidden agenda, found what seemed like genuine remorse. Maybe therapy had actually helped him. Maybe he'd learned something from losing everything. Or maybe this was just another performance in a long line of performances. She'd never know for certain, and she realized she didn't need to. She didn't respond to the email, didn't engage, just archived it and moved on with her day. Because his growth, his redemption, his journey toward being a better person, that was his work to do, not hers to validate or acknowledge or participate in. She'd given him 8 years. She didn't owe him another second. Instead, she focused on what she was building. The foundation had helped over 300 women in 2 years. They'd stopped counting just the financial outcomes and started measuring the less tangible things. Confidence, independence, the look in someone's eyes when they realized they could survive on their own. One woman in particular stuck with Adriana. Sarah, 38 years old, married to a surgeon who controlled every penny, who made her ask for grocery money, who reviewed credit card statements and questioned every purchase, who made her believe she was bad with money, when really he was just good at manipulation. The foundation had helped Sarah open a separate bank account, had connected her with an attorney, had walked her through the process of documenting financial abuse. And 6 months later, Sarah was divorced, living in a modest apartment, working as a paralegal, making a quarter of what she'd had access to during her marriage, but free, completely and utterly free. I have less money now than I did before, Sarah told Adriana at a foundation event, but I have more of myself, and that's worth more than anything in my old life. That sentiment, that understanding, became the foundation's unofficial motto. More of yourself is worth more than anything. Adriana thought about that often, about what she gained by losing what she thought was everything. She gained self-respect, clarity, the understanding that she didn't need anyone to complete her, that she was enough on her own. That partnership should add to your life, not define it. She dated occasionally. The professor relationship had run its course amicably. They wanted different things. But there was no betrayal this time. No lies. Just honest recognition that their paths were diverging, and they'd parted as friends. There were others after him. A journalist, an architect, a nonprofit director from an organization that partnered with Eleanor's foundation. Each relationship taught her something, showed her more clearly what she wanted and what she wouldn't tolerate. And the most important lesson, that she was fine alone. That solitude wasn't the same as loneliness. That building a life that fulfilled you meant you entered relationships from a place of wholeness instead of need. On the 3rd anniversary of her divorce, Adriana hosted a gala for the foundation, held at a museum in Manhattan. Black tie, expensive tickets. The kind of event that attracted donors and press and attention. Patricia gave a speech about leaving her marriage at 72, about how it's never too late to choose yourself, about how the women in her generation had been taught to endure, and how teaching the next generation to demand better was the most important work she'd ever done. Nadia was there with her partner, beaming with pride at what Adriana had built. They remained each other's touchstone through everything. The friend who remembered who you were before the world tried to tell you who to be. And Adriana stood at the front of that ballroom, surrounded by 300 people who believed in the mission, who understood that financial independence wasn't about greed. It was about survival, about having options when life went sideways. She gave a speech about her grandmother, about the inheritance that had saved her, about the playbook that had taught her how to fight, about the importance of women helping women navigate systems designed to keep them dependent. And then she said something she'd been thinking about for months. We talk a lot about empowerment, about giving women tools, about financial literacy and legal rights and all the practical things. And those things matter. They're essential. But I think the most important thing we do here is change the story women tell themselves about their worth. She looked out at the audience, saw faces of women who'd survived terrible things, who'd rebuilt from nothing, who'd chosen themselves when everyone else said they were being selfish. For too long, women have been taught that our value comes from being chosen, by a partner, by an employer, by a system that measures our worth by how useful we are to someone else. But what if we stopped waiting to be chosen? What if we chose ourselves first? What if we built lives so full and complete that partnership became optional instead of necessary? The room was silent, everyone listening. That's what my grandmother taught me. Not with words, with actions. She built an empire while everyone underestimated her. And then she protected it so thoroughly that when I needed it most, it was there, waiting. A fortress I didn't know I had until I needed to defend myself. Adriana's voice caught slightly. She's been gone for 3 years. But her legacy is in this room. In every woman who's learned to protect herself. In every person who's decided their worth isn't negotiable. In every choice to demand respect instead of accepting crumbs. She raised her glass. To Eleanor Hartford. To every grandmother and mother and friend and stranger who taught us how to survive. And to all of us who are learning that survival isn't enough. We deserve to thrive. The room erupted in applause. And Adriana felt her grandmother's presence so strongly it was almost physical. That fierce love, that uncompromising strength, that absolute certainty that women who refused to stay small could change the world. After the gala, after the guests had left and the cleanup crew was packing up, Adriana stood alone in the empty ballroom and thought about the journey she'd taken. From a woman bringing Thai food to an anniversary that never happened, to this, a foundation, a life, a purpose that had nothing to do with being someone's wife. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. I was at your gala tonight. I didn't introduce myself because I wasn't sure you want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know. The foundation helped my sister. She was in a situation like yours. Husband hiding money, planning to leave her with nothing. Your attorneys connected her with resources. She's free now, rebuilding. And it's because you refused to let what happened to you happen to someone else. Thank you. From her, from me, from everyone whose life is better because you survived. Adriana read the message 3 times and realized this was what victory looked like. Not Damien's destruction, not revenge, but ripples, the effect of refusing to stay broken. The power of transformation turned outward to help others transform too. She texted back, "Tell your sister congratulations on her freedom. And thank you for letting me know." Messages like this are why we do this work. Walking out of the museum that night, Adriana looked up at the Manhattan skyline. The same skyline she'd watched from Damien's office that night 3 years ago when her world shattered. The same city, but completely different. Because she was different. Not harder exactly, but clearer, more herself than she'd been in years. Maybe ever. And if you've stayed with this story all the way to the end, I want to tell you something. Whatever you're going through, whatever betrayal you're surviving, whatever loss is breaking your heart right now, you're stronger than you know. You come from a line of people who survived impossible things. And their strength lives in you whether you can feel it right now or not. Choose yourself. Protect yourself. Build something so beautiful from the wreckage that future generations will use it as their fortress. You deserve more than crumbs. You deserve the whole damn table. And anyone who makes you feel otherwise doesn't deserve a seat at it. Like this video if you believe in second chances. Share it with someone who needs to hear they're not alone. Subscribe because every week I bring you stories about resilience and transformation and the power of refusing to stay small. And comment below. Tell me what you learned. Tell me what resonated. Tell me about the moment you chose yourself. Because these stories, they're not just mine to tell. They're ours to share. And in sharing them, we remind each other that we're not alone. That survival is possible. That thriving is even better. The end of Adriana's marriage was the beginning of everything else. And sometimes, that's exactly what endings are meant to be.